Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Vienna, Austria, we have Kerstin Brueller. Kerstin is a vegan animal rights and liberation activist who focuses on online activism. She's also a writer, content creator, illustrator, and graphic designer. Welcome, Kerstin.
Hi, I'm happy and honored to be here today.
Thanks for being on Plant Your Seed. What do you mean by online activism, and how do you feel it works to change people's perceptions?
When I speak of online activism, it means that I create educational blog posts and Instagram social media posts that educate about the injustice that's happening to non-human animals. And I do combine that with illustrations and design it nicely to make it more accessible to people.
Now, how did you become an activist?
I did become an activist after, I would say, 4 months of being an ethical vegan because I had the feeling there's so much information that I've learned in those 4 months, and I wanted to talk with people about it, and I wanted to tell others like what's wrong and what's happening to animals, and because I couldn't believe it myself. That I just started with, I think it was an Instagram story about fish. That was the first post I ever made.
Now, how have you found to be the most effective ways to change people's minds?
It's a tough question because I don't think that there's one right way to do it. I think there's many different ways and many different approaches. And I think it basically comes to what you feel most comfortable with and how you can, I guess, combine what you're good at with animal activism. And it doesn't mean like you have to be good at something, and you can also get good at something. But I would say what your interests are and what you want to do.
Now, what are some of the ways that people can get involved?
For me, I started with social media. I started sharing posts of other pages, other activists, and I started with social media. Then I did street activism, and then I went back to writing blog posts and doing more online. But there's different ways. Like, I mean, people could hand out leaflets. They could attend vegan events and have like a booth there to educate people or to maybe sell vegan products. They could do sticker activism. They could do jog activism, writing vegan messages on the ground, and to inspire people. But they could also, like I said, create their own content and share it or make videos. I mean, there's so many different ways to be active or do podcasts. And I think those are just some ways to be active.
Did you get overwhelmed by the cruelty when you would bear witness at slaughterhouses?
Absolutely. I was almost frozen, I would say. Like the first time I went to a vigil in front of a slaughterhouse, I couldn't believe, even though I knew what was happening to animals, I couldn't believe that this is actually happening. And I'm witnessing that. And then at the same time, I thought, well, how must the animals feel who are on the truck? And it was totally overwhelming. Like, yeah.
Can you take us back to that first day? And what were you feeling?
The first vigil was not even near the city I live in, not near Vienna. It was in Graz, which is 2 hours from Vienna. And I drove there with activist friends, And I was so nervous. My mind was racing. I didn't know what to expect, even though I knew what was going to happen. But I remember I didn't sleep the night before. I remember I was constantly thinking about the victims, the animals, and once I was there, I was actually pretty calm, and I was just focusing on why we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So when the trucks rolled up
Mm-hmm.
with these sentient beings on them, what was going through your head at that time?
Oh, I can't even say, like, it was, I think I can't even remember, like, I was scared to see them, but the reason why I was scared to see them was because I knew that I would see them scared and them knowing what is going to happen. And yeah, I, but I don't have any specific thoughts that I can remember, because it's just like, it's more images than thoughts
Mm-hmm.
that I remember. It's like my mind just went blank, and there are no sounds for me. It's just like seeing them, looking them into the eyes, and yeah,
Do you feel that that changed you?
it definitely changed me. Um, I've been active before that, like I said, like on the streets, and um, like at street events, talking with people about what is happening, but actually seeing the individuals driving to this horrific place, it just put another level of reality to it. And yeah,
How do we stop the normalization of violence on animals?
I believe it's by, like I said before, like there's different ways of being active, but I think one way that will definitely change people's hearts and minds is to see the individuals, like taking them maybe to a vigil if they're open for it, because that's also always the thing. Most people are scared of even attending a vigil themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because they're scared of that they will feel the pain, or emphasize with the animals, and emphasize with their situation they're in, and with what they have to go through. And but of course, like watching or coming across slaughterhouse footage is definitely something that changes people's minds as well. But also, I think words are also really, really strong. So like I said, there's not one right way of doing it, but I think it's more like different approaches. And yeah.
Now, we all grow up in a system that's telling us that some non human animals matter more than others, that it's normal and natural to eat some, pet and love and care for others. How can we change that?
I think it's by talking to people about their ethics and ethical views, and how they perceive other individuals, sentient individuals in general, and how they feel about respecting other individuals. And it's tough, because like this conditioning, it's what we all grow up with. And I always wonder, like, what is this one moment, like, or this maybe this one sentence that changes people's minds. But being open for the information, and being open for not being scared of confronting yourself with the uncomfortable feeling that you will have if you see those individuals on screen, or on the slaughterhouse truck, or if somebody else talks about them.
What is it about veganism that challenges people's values?
It's because they feel guilty. I mean, I if somebody would if somebody comes up to you and says, well, what you're eating was actually a sentient being before who had to suffer, who didn't want to die, people instantly feel guilty because people think they don't think badly of themselves. Like they like to see themselves as a good person and as a empathetic person and as someone who cares. But then if they're confronted with the truth, this um, it kind of attacks their perception of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because they know that eating animals equals killing them, equals those individuals are in pain, and they do not want to be responsible for that. And that's why so many people ignore the fact and don't even think about it. And it was the same with me. Like in my not yet vegan years,
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't want to think about it. I didn't do any research. I just didn't.
How can we have people make the connection between animals and the products in the supermarket?
That's a tough question.
Mm.
I think directly in the supermarket, it's really tough because we're so conditioned not to see the individual but the product itself, and it's always nicely packaged and wrapped with those images, very
Mm-hmm.
manipulative images of happy animals on it. And I've also seen recently here in Austria, like they like to use certain words like um, organic animals, uh, for the animals, for the farmer, and a good life. Like those are just like words they like to use. And it's really tough for people to realize who they're buying or whose bodies and flesh they're buying or whose secretions they're buying at a supermarket, that it's even hard for them to choose a plant-based product instead because they're so conditioned to go to certain aisles and take a certain product out of the supermarket shelf. So what would definitely help this them realizing who they're buying, whose flesh they're buying, would be changing the laws on how those products are packaged and what
Mm.
words are allowed to be used. Yeah.
How important is it for you to live according to your values?
It's the most important thing in my life. It's I never knew how important it was to me until I adapted a plant-based diet and went vegan for ethical reasons. But I always thought of myself as a empathetic person, but I was not aligned with those values at all. Like my actions didn't portray that at all. And once I realized that, that was the reason why I changed. And there is no looking back at that time, but just looking forward and finally living according to my values.
I noticed you have a lot of tattoos.
I do.
What do you want people to know about tattoos and the ink specifically?
um, I didn't know myself for a very long time that tattoos can not be vegan. So that there are colors out there that have animal ingredients in the
Mm-hmm.
ink, or that certain products used for the skin, for example, are animal fats. So when they tattoo and they try to soften the skin a little bit, that what they put on there can be an animal product. But also like razors, for example, could not be vegan because they have this gluey strip on top of the razor, and that could be like like fixed with an adhesive that has animal bones in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would when people ask me about my tattoos, I always tell them that there is a lot to know about vegan tattoos, but it's also nowadays pretty easy to get a vegan tattoo.
How and when did you transition to a plant-based diet?
I transitioned to a plant-based diet in late 2017 and became an ethical vegan in January 2018. And the reason was because I was confronted with the information why milk and eggs are actually hurting and harming animals. And yeah, because I was a vegetarian for 8 years before I went vegan. And that was because I never knew what's wrong with milk and eggs. And then I got my answers and it hit me.
Now, what do you mean by ethical vegan for some of our listeners who might not know the difference?
So ethical vegan, I like to use the term ethical vegan because veganism is an ethical stance and it's against the exploitation and injustice of non-human animals. And because there's still different reasons for people to get in touch with a plant-based diet and veganism, I like to use the term ethical vegan because it basically says, okay, I understood why it is important to be vegan, and it is because to stop harming animals and stop consuming and using animals. And yeah, that's the ethical part of it that I think is really important to know.
What were your feelings when you realized that vegetarianism does hurt animals?
I was shocked. I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe it. I was speechless because I thought as a vegetarian that I'm doing enough, and it wasn't not enough. It definitely wasn't enough, and I was still hurting animals even though I thought I wasn't. And I felt lied to, and I felt really, really bad. And I felt guilty, really guilty and also that I didn't do any research. That like I was really mad at myself.
What positive changes, if any, did you see both mentally and physically when you changed to a vegan diet?
It was a huge change for me physically and mentally. Physically, I I think for 10 years I had a horrible digestion, and I don't know, I was feeling so sick to my stomach so often, and I just talked to my partner about it a couple of days ago, um, and reminded myself of it that I felt so sick all the time. I felt tired. I woke up feeling sick to my stomach, and I really had a really bad digestion. And I remember 2 weeks of being on a plant-based diet that totally changed. And I know a lot of people probably say that, but it is true.
Mm.
And it it's like day and night for me. It like my body was working again. It felt lighter. I felt more energized. I I'm more myself, and I do have a better connection with my body and the way I feel. And when I wake up, I'm more thankful for feeling good.
How about mentally?
Mentally, also like day and night. I don't know where to start. um, when I think back of my non-vegan years, I often ask myself like who I was back then,
Mm.
because I made myself small, and I never had an opinion because I never wanted to offend people. So I was a people pleaser, and I would just probably say anything to not fight with others or not to get into a bigger discussion with people. And it totally changed me. And like I stood up for myself, but of course in the first place, I stood up for animals. And by standing up for animals, I stood up for myself too, or I learned how to stand up for myself as well. And it freed me in a way that I would have never expected. And it made me so much aware to, in general, different injustices we have and that exist on this planet. And it was just overwhelming. And even talking about it, it totally overwhelms me to just pick one change, because there's so many different changes that challenged me mentally and still are. And I'm learning something new every single day. And yeah, it's very enriching, even though it's not always easy. It's very enriching to know that there's so much to know out there.
So veganism changed your personality from being a people pleaser to standing up for yourself.
Yes,
Why do you think that is?
because I don't care that much anymore what people think of me. I care more about what I think of myself and how I want to see myself and what I would like to do with my life, and to give it a reason and to give it value. And because I know that now I'm doing the right thing, now that I'm acting according to my values, and it's like breaking through a wall that has been there my whole life, and it's like a totally different world. And yeah, I feel free because it's helped me to get out of that conditioning that's been there all the time, kind of holding me back from being who I really am and who I want to be. And it also challenged me of like asking myself who I want to be. I think that's the biggest thing.
Was there anything that was holding you back from becoming vegan, or was it just the lack of knowledge?
It was just a lack of knowledge, I think, because once the knowledge was there, like I'm pretty radical when it comes to making changes. When I know why it is important and why I need to do a certain change. So I know it was just like the lack of information and the lack of taking action myself to go online and to answer the questions that I have. And so that's totally different today, because when a question appears today, the first thing that I do is I do research, and I try to read as much as possible about something and educate myself through the information that's available to us.
What is it about animals that makes you so passionate?
It's also a hard question because I think they're fascinating, and they're so fascinating as species, but also as individuals. Once you get to know a certain individual, like as a species, I think it's incredible what animals can do, what we as human beings can't do, for example. And I always find it really shocking that humans belittle other animals just because, I don't know, they're not like us. Or on the other hand, if you look, for example, at a bat, like what a bat can do, and like what instinct they have and how they use what is naturally given to them, it's incredible and it's fascinating. I do love watching animal documentaries, and it's, I don't know, I'm just, when I watch something like that, I'm like a little kid,
Mhm.
um, always being so excited to get to know something new about a species.
What is one thing that's exciting you right now in your life?
Just to be myself, to be so connected with myself, and to know that there's people out there who understand the values that I have and the views that I have, and that are, and to know that there's people out there fighting for the same cause, for animals and their rights and their freedom. And that excites me every single day to know that I'm not alone with what is my life's mission, I would say.
Where did you get the courage to start your activism?
It just built up on the inside, and then it just had to get out. And it came to a point where I was just like, I don't care what other people think. I just need to get the information out there. And if people start, I don't know, going away, or if they just don't want to be friends anymore, that's okay too. Because I was so strengthened from the inside and from knowing that I'm doing the right thing, and that I just started not to care anymore if anybody would not yet agree, I would say. And it was more important for me to get the information out there and to maybe reach out to other people who are open to perceive that information than to please other people again.
Now, when you transitioned to a plant-based diet, was there any trigger that helped you get there?
Um,
Because you were vegetarian at the time,
yes.
and then you said you did research. What sort of research did you do?
Um, I did watch a lot of activists online on YouTube having street conversations. So that that really helped me to understand, but also to argue if being confronted with certain questions by friends or family members. And um, yeah, that helped me. And also, my partner and I watched What the Health,
Mm-hmm.
the documentary, and I remember it just blew my mind. I remember he said something like, "We have to watch this documentary. It's supposed to be really good and eye-opening." And I was like, "Okay, well, you know, it was uh, the holidays at the end of 2017, and I was just like, okay, well, we can watch the documentary." And I remember from being more of lying down, I sat up in the middle of the documentary and be like, no way, no way. And I just couldn't believe it at all. Like, just, I remember having a feeling of being lied to. It, yeah, it was overwhelming. And I remember I was speechless at the end of this documentary. I was like, I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. And then I remember I went online and I did all the research and yeah.
Now, how did you feel when you realized you'd been misled or lied to kind of your whole life?
I felt sad. I felt really sad because like I said, I never liked to see myself as a person that would harm other animals, because I always said I love animals. I love animals. But then on the one hand I said I loved animals, and on the other hand I I consumed them. I
Mm.
wore them. And it was just, I felt really bad that I did that for such a long time, for 29 years at that time. And then on the other hand, I felt sad. I felt misled. And then I also felt angry. But yeah, I remember talking to my mom and I was like, why didn't you tell me? And I mean, she was not a vegan at that time. And then I remember she just said, what do you mean? And so I talked with her about it, and that actually led to her looking more into veganism and now being an ethical vegan for years too. Um, but I just remember I was so confused. I was so confused.
So you've converted your mom.
Yeah. Well, I would say she converted herself
Right. But I mean,
by,
you presented the information and she went and took it the way she wanted to and
yes,
reviewed it.
yes, we did have a lot of conversations. Which I can't really remember, but she tells me all the time. And I guess it was just like that information coming out, and I my mom and I have a really good relationship, and I do have a lot of, like, I'm very similar to her, so I knew it was just a matter of time. And she perceived that information, and she watched videos on YouTube, and then she said, well, I can imagine being vegetarian, but vegan, I don't know, it's too hard. And then I remember I talked to her 2 weeks after, and she said, I just couldn't eat cheese anymore. I couldn't eat eggs anymore. And that was the start of her becoming vegan and adapting a plant-based diet. So,
what is one hack or tip that helps you stay on track with your plant-based diet?
To remind myself every single day why I'm doing it. Every single day. Like, I wake up and I make myself something to eat, and I know it's only plants that I'm putting in my breakfast bowl, and I just look into the eyes of my dog companion, and I then know why I'm doing it, and that it's the right thing to do.
What cookbook or book or even documentary have you given or gifted or suggested to someone transitioning to a plant-based diet?
Well, not really a cookbook, but I always tell people to go on the pages of the Vegan Society, either the UK one or here in Austria, the Austrian one, because they do have so much valuable information on there, but also free recipes. And I found that really helpful for people to just, scroll through a couple of different recipes and then just choose whatever they feel like choosing and cooking. And what I also always suggest is, well, watching documentaries like Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, What the Health, or the other one that's called Forks Over Knives. And I also always tell people, well, please watch Dominion. And I know that it's hard for people to, when they open the website and then they see, okay, well, I know this is going to be about animal cruelty, but I always tell them it's very educational and they need to watch it and see how they feel, because it's so important to know why you need to make a change.
Finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you were vegan and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
Before I went vegan, I would say disconnected to myself, to the world, to other sentient beings, and to even plants.
Mm-hmm.
And now I just feel connected. I feel connected to the world around me. And that's why I personally try to make it a better place, because I want other people to see how beautiful it is and how special it is what we have here, and all the earthlings that are on this planet, and how special they are, and how like the different individuals they are with their unique personalities, but also with the unique traits that they have, and to cherish that instead of destroying all of it. And yeah, so I feel way more connected than ever before, also to myself.
It's such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What is the best way for people to follow you, support you on Instagram and the web in general?
Well, thanks again for having me. The best way to follow me would be to go to Instagram and look for my profile, which is Kerstin Brueller. And yeah, just to interact with the posts, and if they speak to someone, to share them and to just share the vegan message and to make it more accessible to others.
Thanks again, Kerstin, for being on Plant Your Seed.
Well, thank you so much.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.